3 for Game Boy was released at the end of 1992, a year after the second one. The first thing I'll say about this game is that you're gonna die. Die, die, die. Much like Mega Man 3 for NES, the programmers must have thought, hey, people said number 2 was too easy, so let's give them a real challenge. Well, it worked somewhat, and I mentioned in my Mega Man 2 review that they balanced things out in the third game. Well, playing it again after so many years, I realized it wasn't as perfect as I remember. Let's start with the levels. Each level is well designed, and the sprites are straight from the NES, so the graphics are top-notch for the Game Boy. The levels are hard, however, and you'll probably die at least once or twice per stage. Many bosses are fairly easy though, so it's almost a relief to get to them. The bosses and levels are a combination from Mega Man 3 and 4 for NES. But now and then what makes this game unfairly hard is the slowdown. I don't know what the programmers were thinking, but it sure wasn't about speed. Remember Mega Man 3 for NES? The code was so optimized and efficient that the bosses were jumping into the middle of the screen before everything else was ready. For the most part, the game just felt fast and responsive. We all know about the common problem with older games. Too many sprites equals slowdown, but in some cases I think it's just sloppy programming. The music and sound effects are all ripped or converted from the NES games and sound spot on. The pitch was so high in Mega Man 2 that neighborhood dogs would come running. So thankfully they've dropped it down a few octaves. Most background music is listenable and you'll recognize them all from the NES games, including a few memorable tunes. One other aspect about Mega Man that has always bothered me is the Mega Buster. It's a nice addition like the slide. One of the main channels, ruining the music. And you had to listen to that pulsating sound until you should have had the charge sound cut off when you were fully charged. What was that? I always looked forward to the Wily levels in the Game Boy games. This is where they deviate somewhat from the NES and have some more original level design and bosses. Not to mention the Wily music is always original tunes made for the Game Boy, this one being one of the best. Rush Jet is back, but you can't change directions this time. I kept forgetting. In Mega Man 3 you fight a giant Susie twice, and then you face Punk, who doesn't have much of a role but at least adds some variation to the game. In my Mega Man 2 review I focused a lot on the bad aspects of the game and failed to mention that I actually did enjoy playing it. The tunes weren't all bad and many were listenable as long as you don't mind the high pitch. Other Mega Man games certainly have far worse music. So aside from the slowdown, Mega Man 3 is a great game. It's hard, it crams in as many levels as it can, and has outstanding graphics and sound quality for the Game Boy. Back in early 1993, I was 12 years old and I see this advertisement in a game magazine for something called a Handy Boy. It was this monster add-on for your Game Boy that was not only a light and amplifier, but it had fold-out speakers and an add-on joystick. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So later on I mentioned it to a friend of mine and he's like, hey, I saw that, they've got them at Electronics Boutique. Obviously this was way before they changed their name to EB Games. So I look up one of their stores and I go over there. Sure enough, there it was. I buy it on the spot, and if I remember right, it was about $35 US. STD Entertainment? What's that, some kind of anti-STD device? The joystick itself worked alright, but the buttons were a bit clunky and sticky. The speaker's light and amplifier worked fantastic, but who on earth would use this neck strap? Aside from the danger of your Game Boy smashing on the sidewalk, I'd be more concerned about the social rejection. The Handy Boy used the Game Boy's battery power, which this device was used for, but it was always a bit of a pain to plug in. Finally. And that's as far as I got. No amount of blowing into cartridges fixed this problem. Looks like my Game Boy is finally dead. One thing I always wanted to do was combine the powers of the Handy Boy with the Game Genie and make some kind of Ultra Game Boy. But unfortunately, the power lead for the Handy Boy wouldn't reach with the Game Genie plugged in. But let's move on. Mega Man 4 took the best gameplay elements of Mega Man and refined them to create yet another fantastic game. The graphics are even better, with more animated and detailed backgrounds, and once again the sprites are amazing. One of the best things about classic Mega Man is the originality of the enemies. Most of them have unique characteristics that made the game so fun to play. Mega Man 4 is crammed with these kind of enemies, probably more so than the previous games. Rush is back, and so is Beat from Mega Man 5 for NES. You get Beat by collecting the letters of his name during the stages, although he's not entirely useful. One of the better weapons of the latter Mega Man games is the Ring Boomerang, which you'll use pretty often to grab various items. This time around, Dr. Light's lab allows you to buy power-ups with P-chips that you collect along the way. This is a neat feature, although it isn't necessarily needed as there are plenty of items to collect in the stages. The only real useful power-up is the Energy Balancer. It will automatically fill the lowest weapon energy when you pick up an energy capsule. Much easier than selecting the weapon first. And if those features weren't enough, even Proto Man drops in for a visit. Once again, the quality of the music is great, although this time you have to dig a little deeper to find the better melodies. What about the slowdown? Well, it's back and nothing has improved. Unfortunately, it's something you had to live with on the Game Boy. Whoa, did you just see that? The Mega Buster is back, of course, but this time it has a bit of a kickback, which can send you over the edge. Overall, this is a really polished Mega Man game, and like the previous games, it's a lot of fun. Despite the flaws I've mentioned, the Mega Man series was some of the best games available for the original Game Boy. And for some nostalgic reason, the first one would still have to be my favourite.